Morning, Brenda.
Hi.
So Nova will not be joining us apparently for this meeting, so we'll proceed directly into your inaugural process of electing a chair.
I nominate Jim Abram as chair.
Director Abram is nominated. Director Abram, you're okay with that nomination?
I certainly am, and thank my nominator.
Thank you very much. Any further nominations? Going once, going twice, going 3 times? No further nominations. Director Abram declared elected for 2021.
Hey, great.
Now turn to the election of vice chair. And if
I'll nominate Director Lee.
Director Lee has been nominated. Director Lee, are you okay with that nomination?
Sure, unless Director Wally wants to give it a try.
No.
Okay, I'm good with it then.
Okay. So again, no further nominations. We'll declare Director Lee elected vice chair for 2021. Thank you very much. And over to your newly elected chair, Director Abram.
And I want to thank my constituents and fellow colleagues for electing me as chair once again. Thank you very much. So I think this meeting, has it already been called to order, Tom?
Yes, and we're now on the adoption of public agenda item E.
Right, that's where I was going to go. Okay, so adoption of public agenda.
Move adoption.
Second.
Okay, anyone opposed? Carried. Adoption of the minutes.
Move adoption of the minutes of November 4, 2020.
Second.
Any corrections, comments, whatever? None opposed. Okay, that's carried.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? Because I don't know.
Sure.
Is the alternate for Area B present at the meeting, or is it just 3 electoral directors?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I can advise that we've been told that alternate director Dow will not be able to attend today.
Okay. I didn't know if she was in the room or not.
No, she.
Thank you.
Okay, so on to business arising from the minutes. None.
I would, let me see.
Go ahead, Director Lee.
No, I'm good. I'm good, thanks.
Okay. Moving on down to staff reports, we have a development variance permit application for Crombie in Area C.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, John will speak to this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This application, 2080 Breton Road, Herrick Bay. The proponents wish to receive authorization for the construction of a 64.3 square meter addition to an existing 43.1 square meter guest cottage. The addition will provide a home office, kitchen and living space for the applicant's children who are returning to live and to work on Quadra Island. The expanded building will adhere to bylaw setback requirements and is well below the maximum allowable height of 10 meters, and height is not a factor in the variance. Any potential impact the variance may have can be minimized if additional landscaping is placed along the southeast boundary of the property, adjacent to the residence at 2089 Valdez Drive. We have received an additional letter of support from the neighbours at 2115 Valdez Drive, which is on the west side of Breton Road. We have not received any letters of objection respecting this variance, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, before I speak on it, I'd like to ask the other directors if they have any comments.
I have 3 questions or 3 issues I'd like to ask the staff. So
Okay, go ahead.
Through the chair to the staff. Was this construction already underway when the application was made for this variance?
Through the chair, yes, application, the construction was already underway at the time.
Okay, and have there been any letters from nearby property owners commenting on this application? Other than the one that we were given in the agenda?
Yes, again, through the chair, we received a letter of support from the neighbors residing at 2115 Valdez Drive, which is immediately to the northwest of the subject property. It's a corner property that fronts on Valdez Drive and Breton Road, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and my last question. If this variance is granted, will one of the conditions of the permit be to put additional landscaping on the southeast side adjacent to 2089 Valdez Drive, as suggested in the report?
Again, through the chair, that would be a recommendation, yes, that be done.
A recommendation will be included in the variance permit, or do the directors have to make that a condition?
The directors could make the variance subject to landscaping be placed on the boundary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that it, Brenda?
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, Gerald, anything to say?
No, I'm good with it.
Okay, and if you don't mind me speaking from the chair?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so first of all, I'd just like to say that this type of development where there's, an added on to an existing cottage or converting an existing cottage or whatever is something that I've been promoting for 20 years, for people to be able to bring kids back to Quadra Island to work and live here and contribute to our economy and be able to hopefully through Connected Coast be able to actually have businesses going that are remote. I was, as usual, I'm quite concerned about the fact that this is first time I've seen it was when I got my agenda. I had no idea this was going on. And the fact that the building was started, not only started, but potentially livable prior to any application for siting or approval. So the setbacks are just right on the border as far as legality. On the side yards, the front yard and backyard are fine. But, this subdivision was designed by one of the old timers on the island, Len Lakeberg. He designed that whole subdivision along Open Bay, and he had to do some really creative designing of shapes of property in order to get proper frontages, et cetera, et cetera. And he did a really good job. The problem is that some of the configurations are, because of their shape, very narrow in some places and do have the ability or potential to be very close to their neighbors. And this one is one which is very close to its neighbor. So, if there's no objection from the neighbor, well, that's one thing. Neighbors don't always stay the same, and maybe another neighbor next year or 10 years. So, are we setting ourselves up by granting a variance of such degree to then have a complaint come in later saying, this place is too close, blah, blah, blah. I just don't want to create future problems for bylaw enforcement, or it wouldn't even be bylaw enforcement, it'd be something. Anyway, the it is only a 5-acre property, and 5-acre properties, you know, they have a very specific size limit for the main house and for the guest cottage. We raised that guest cottage size from 640 square feet to about 860 square feet a number of years ago, because we realized that that 640 would not allow for even a couple to move back rather than a couple with a couple kids. So we raised it to the size of a small 2-bedroom house. Well, now this one is going way beyond that. It's going almost to the size of the primary principal dwelling. And I'm just wondering what kind of a precedent this is going to set with such a huge variance. Is this going to happen, you know, on every 5-acre property in the area? And if so, it's going to be a very, very crowded West Vancouver neighborhood. So that's that part of it. The comments already been made about a fencing or a hedge or whatever, and I'll move after we've, you know, gone through this, that a solid cedar, I guess they're those columnar cedar plants that make a really nice hedge to a max or a minimum of 10 feet be planted along that border where there is a possible intrusion on the neighbor's property, where they will be able to each see each other. And I think we want to avoid that as much as possible so that people can have their privacy. They didn't move out there to be in a city. So I'm in favor of doing it, but I want to make sure that that is actually part of the development's variance permit, mandated, not a request. It has to.
Now, Mr. Chair, can I make a comment?
Sure, Gerald.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I wonder if the neighbors actually want a big fence between the two. Maybe they like to walk across and visit their neighbors without any obstruction. The reason I say that is because when the property changes hands in the future, if and when that happens, the purchasers, before they purchase, are well aware of the neighbor and what the situation is. So they go into that voluntarily. Just a question.
And it's a very valid question, and it was one of the first things I thought of, you know, and I actually have in my notes, it says privacy fence, provided it does not block access or view of the existing neighbor. So, you know, maybe that could be written in there, that that would be the condition, so that there still would be, you know, possibly a gateway through it, or if it might possibly block their visual view of the water or whatever, then, you know, that may be something that could be discussed with the people that are applying for the variance to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I totally get it, and I understand that.
Yeah, I was just...
Thank you for bringing that comment up.
I was just thinking, though, that if you're going to require him to put up a fence, it might be a good idea to have the neighbor's consent.
Okay, well, I guess we could put that right in the variance. We'd have to talk to staff about that.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Pardon me?
Just putting my hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm kind of handicapped here because I'm using the phone and computer. Whose hand is up? Sorry?
It's Noba speaking.
Okay, I understood you were not on this meeting.
I was 3 minutes late. My apologies.
Okay, so Noba, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll certainly follow the lead of yourself, Director for the area, but I did want to reiterate the comments you had made about, you know, perhaps not legal precedent, but sort of an optical precedent about this. It has never occurred to me that one could vary the size of a cabin share. Now, clearly one can. I'm not questioning our authority to do so. It's never come up because it's been a long-standing discussion on Cortez Island for, decades. What should the cabin size be? And some think it should be, as on Quadra, much more substantial than it is. And some are bigger than that, and, et cetera, et cetera. And I've just never heard staff or any landowner say, oh, well, maybe on a one-off case here and there, we can vary the size of it. So I do think that this opens another toolbox that myself and landowners may well not be aware of, and we may rightly see a bunch of these. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate those comments, and this was, my very first balked comment when I saw the agenda that this is huge. This is like, more than doubling the whole thing, and that is, in my mind, not a variance. It's a whole other thing, whatever you want to call it. Variances are usually, like a 7-foot extension to a deck or, something like that, that may come close to a property line. And it's been my experience anyway, and all the time I've been a director. So this is quite different, and it's the fact that it was started and practically finished prior to ever talking to planners is, very concerning to me. I think that's people just, asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And, no offense to the owners, but I do think it is rather different. And I certainly, absolutely am going to say once again that I do not agree with the process that is being used by planning and other departments to not inform the director of what's going on in their area. And it's turning political decisions into basically just rote staff work. And
Mr. Director, Mr. Chair, if I can interject, are you again asking that staff give you as an individual director a heads up before the other board members? If you are, then please put that, Mr. Chair, please put that.
Sorry, that we're going to agree to disagree on this one.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask you because there's a few documents that we operate by. They're called the Local Government Act, the Community Charter, and the Code of Conduct, which all prohibit that. So I'm going to please ask you, if you're going to continue pursuing that, put that into a resolution and I will bring it to the board. But do not ask me to compromise the Local Government Act and the Code of Conduct and give directors the proverbial heads up on this.
Okay, well, like I said,
it's not something we're going to agree to disagree with. You're not going to get it. And if you want it, please put a resolution forward.
Okay, we'll be glad to do that, and we'll do that. All I'm saying is that discussion on any subject has always been appropriate, and in this case it isn't, so therefore we're having it now. Okay, so here we are, and just hope that people don't feel that we're taking up too much time by discussing it at the committee rather than individually. Anyway, the process is before us to either admit it or not admit it. I would like to ask, I believe there's, let's see, we have development variances and we have development variance permits. Have I got those two as two separate items, or am I mixing that up?
Mr. Chairman, those are the same item, I believe. Development variants are simply the authority to vary development based on a development variance permit that has been issued.
Okay, so they're basically the same thing?
Yes, there are development permits, which is a different animal than development variance permits. Right now, you're dealing with a development variance permit.
And a development variance permit will always come forward to the elected officials to decide upon. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is our process.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just a reminder, Mr. Chair, you're currently just on receipt of the report right now.
Yes, I understand.
Mr. Chair, I have another question.
Okay, question?
Director Lee. May I go? Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I thought that the Local Government Act would require that a variance is not permitted if it contravenes the official community plan. And my question through the chair to planning is the official community plan for Area C, in my recollection, allows one principal dwelling and a guest cottage of no more than 800 square feet, I believe it was. This is coming up to, it's 1,156 square feet, or almost 300, it's 298 square feet over the size recommended in the official community plan. So where something happens at the local government where we are going to ignore the official community plan and allow a variance on a zoning bylaw, we're varying the requirements in the zoning bylaw, but we haven't even touched upon whether the general planning area would support having 2 permanent residences on a property, on properties that are intended to be 1 principal residence and a guest house. If you have people living permanently in the guest house, it's not a guest house. It's another house. This is bigger than my house. So I don't understand why we are not doing an OCP review on this, or why we're not taking it to the general public on Quadra to ask, is this what you want? Do you want to change the whole philosophy of guest house and make them into 2 permanent houses? I thought under the Local Government Act, we are not allowed to contravene the OCP in these applications.
Okay, good point. I'd have to ask staff through Dave.
Excuse me, I think that was Donegal. Excuse me.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question from Director Lee. Staff does not view this as being in contravention to the official community plan. The official community plan does not put forward regulatory provisions with respect to size of guest dwellings or size of single-family dwellings. What the official community plan does do is it provides policy with respect to densities on Quadra Island. With respect to this application is in line with the OCP.
Mr. Chair, I had a similar comment question.
Okay, go ahead, Nova.
Thank you. I think Director Lee stated a little bit more emphatically than I would, but I do concur that this is a pretty big deal, not perhaps in the specifics of this one, but as it relates to the intention for the island. Certainly on Cortez, the intention was that there would be a house and a guest cottage. Over the years, those guest cottages have become residences, for 1 or 2 people. It's certainly not a guest cottage anymore, but it is limited in its size. I understand there's sort of been a similar history on Quadra. So my question is more about, my understanding is one cannot vary density, but one can vary house size. So if this application came in for a variance for a house from, whatever, 800 square feet to 8,000 square feet, is that still considered a variance? Because what we're starting to do is push up against the intention of the zoning bylaw, I would say, because, as Director Lee said, this is, pushing on a regular sized home. So again, I will submit that I will defer to the director for the area, but I do wonder if this doesn't trigger a broader conversation. Or is this the one-off that then gets passed and then triggers a broader conversation? I'm happy to follow your lead, Director Abram.
Okay, thank you, Nova. I would have to ask staff through Dave to please cite the section of the OCP that talks about the Rural 2 zone, I believe it is, that is 5 acres in size, that these properties are, and that mentions the house and the guest cottage, if it mentions anything about size. So can you please just read that out to us?
Well, I don't have it. Aniko?
Yeah, I realize it would be Aniko or John that would do that. I don't have it in front of me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would have to defer to John. I believe he's got the bylaws in his office where he's participating.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Aniko. So what I see here under the country residential policies of the OCP, section 314, the following policies are specific to those lands designated country residential. Let me see. A size restricted secondary dwelling shall be permitted on properties of 2 hectares or more, subject to conditions outlined in the zoning bylaw and applicable provincial regulations. So it talks about a size restricted secondary dwelling, but it doesn't restrict the size to a specific figure, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, but it does, the standard practice is that the OCP is the policy document. It tells you that there will be a size restricted second dwelling, and then the regulatory bylaw is the one that sets that regulated size. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the in this case, the zoning bylaw is the regulatory document.
Okay, so we're not necessarily needing to change the OCP, but we are certainly looking at the zoning bylaw in this case for a major variance, if you want to call it that. And, you know, I'm really stumped as to what to do about it because of the precedent. I'm not concerned about this particular property or the intent of this particular property. It's all good. But, you know, if everybody does it, which sometimes happens, you know, one person does it, then everybody else does it. You know, we could get ourselves into a pickle here. So I don't know. Is there any benefit in deferring this to the next meeting to have further discussions with staff if we're allowed to do that? Have to get Dave's permission. And with possibly the applicants, I don't know, to find out, you know, how this really does impact the neighborhood. This neighborhood is a very, very upscale, long-standing, very fussy neighborhood. So I'm just, you know, the 50-meter notification, I don't even believe would go off the property more than one property each side. So that, you know, that's something that I would once again like to bring before our committee to expand that. It's in a bylaw apparently, procedures bylaw. So I think that needs to be changed so that we include more people than just the next door neighbor. It affects the neighborhood. This is, don't forget, in a bay. And, you know, bays, they have more than 2 sides. They have a horseshoe effect where people can see in from all different directions. So I'm very concerned about it and commend the people for doing it, for bringing their kids back. I think that's great. But I'm a little concerned about the method it's been taken and the ramifications down the road. So I'm looking for advice, and maybe we should move or vote on receipt first, and then move on. Is that how would that sound, Tom?
Mr. Chairman, that would be my recommendation, to complete the vote on receipt, and then if there's other actions the committee wishes to take, then you can proceed with that.
Okay, so is there anything else on receipt?
I do have one other question directed to you, Director Abram, if that's appropriate.
Okay.
Just in terms of procedurally how to move forward at this point, I wonder, and maybe you want to think on this a month, I wonder what you might think about actually referring this to a broader community discussion of the zoning bylaw amendment on this particular issue of secondary cabin size. Because it's just in my 12 years of office, this has never come up as a tool that anybody thinks about using. So yeah, just wondering what you think about using this as a trigger for a broader community discussion, or if this is just not the time for that.
I think it certainly is a subject for a broader community discussion, but I don't know if it would be prejudicial, I guess would be the word, to do it during the process of one particular spot being done. You know, maybe the one can be done and then the discussion can take place. Is this the right thing to do in the future? And something can come out of that. I don't know.
Mr. Chair?
Somewhat drawing a blank here, sorry.
Mr. Chair, Director Lee again.
Okay.
I am troubled by the fact that we are completely throwing out the concept of guest cottage. We are increasing the density. We're doubling the density of permanent housing, because a guest cottage isn't a permanent, a guest staying in a cottage is not a permanent increase to density, but turning it into a house, that's doubling the density. So I disagree with planning's point on that. We are changing the density by doing this. I'm concerned about the definition of guest cottage in your bylaws, and I'm concerned about having a definition in our bylaws of what constitutes a variance. So if, like, we could set limits on, so that staff have some guidelines on what constitutes a variance. A variance is not a wholesale ignoring the bylaws and going to the largest size that the applicant wants. It is, you know, a 5 or 10% adjustment to some variance to the bylaw. It's minor, it's not major. And what this is major, and what this is could affect the whole neighborhood. And I'm really uncomfortable with this disconnect between planning and the director for the area that's elected to represent the views of his constituents. I think we have to have some tighter definitions in the bylaw that staff can follow, because I think this is really getting out of hand.
Mr. Chair, that's out of order. It's called the Local Government Act and the Code of Conduct bylaw that we have for the SOD.
I would like a better definition of guest cottage and a better, tighter definition of what a variance is. And it can be in accordance with Local Government Act. I'm sure Local Government Act doesn't intend to wholesale throw out our bylaws and replace them with variances.
Okay.
Can I ask for clarity? Is this considered a guest cottage or a secondary dwelling, or what's the language?
Well, I believe the language in the bylaw is one permanent residence and one guest cottage. Or maybe it's called a secondary dwelling. I'm not sure. John, you'd have to be the one to tell me that, because you have it in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm just looking up here in the zoning bylaw, the actual word that's used. And the word is one guest dwelling per lot.
Okay,
so we are doubling the density by making it a permanent house.
okay, so let's, if there's no more comments under receipt, let's go ahead and receive it so we can move on and make some motions. Okay, so is there any objection to receipt? Okay, that's passed. Item B, that the committee recommend the development variance permit Crombie as attached in the staff report be approved and corporate officer be authorized to issue.
Move that B be deferred until staff have collected a wider response from the neighborhood on this proposal.
Okay, I have a mover of a deferral motion. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, there's a seconder. Okay, so all of those in favor, well, first of all, is there any discussion? Sorry.
Sorry, this is deferral of the whole matter for a month?
Yes.
Well, I believe it was, the wording was until there can be a discussion with the wider neighborhood. So whether that's a month or 2 months, I'm not sure, but I would think it could take place easily in a month.
So my apologies, I was moving from one room to another when the deferral motion was made. My second stands, but I don't actually think that this is about the neighborhood. I think the last comment about, sorry, so when staff said that this is indeed a guest cottage, it is not anymore. So I think that either we deal with this as a standalone specific application or an island-wide discussion is my sense.
Okay, so is that, did you say your second stands or not?
I don't know that I can withdraw it.
I think that would be inappropriate to ask someone who's seconded something to withdraw their second.
Yeah, my apologies. My second was uninformed. I wouldn't have seconded that, so my apologies. However, we can stand and we can vote on it.
I would like to point out too that there is the question of whether the neighborhood would want that that buffer fence put up, or what their opinion is on that, because it does affect that whole long stretch of property. I really think the neighborhood needs to know what is proposed and to give their response. The bigger questions of whether this meets the criteria of the OCP and the zoning bylaws, that we could deal with at a later date. Right now, we're just dealing with this application, and I'm trying to hone the deferral to consulting with neighbors on the impacts of this application on them. So some of the things we talked about, the fence, the size, the density on their small piece of property. We need to know what the neighbors are thinking about that.
Mr.
So
Chair.
this is basically a deferral to discuss with the neighborhood, not necessarily with the entire island.
Yeah.
About the impacts of this particular proposal.
Yes.
Okay, so if that is the deferral motion, is there any further comment on that?
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Gerald.
Yeah, I'd just like to know your opinion on this deferral motion. You, in my opinion, have two options. Either we can defer it if that's what you wish, or else we can defeat it, and then you can step down from the chair and make a motion that is acceptable to yourself.
Yeah, I don't really have a motion other than the things that have been talked about within the deferral, which are, fencing, or not fencing, but landscaping, the, immensity of the development permit compared to what we normally have as development permits. And lastly, that it's really the neighborhood in this case, in this particular case, that we need to hear from. And we're not hearing from them, other than perhaps one on each side. So, you know, if that's who we need to talk to find out about this particular one, any other one that would come forward, I would assume would have to be considered on its own merits, and I'd have to ask planning, does precedent have any sway in that discussion in the future? That would be a question to staff.
Mr. Chairman, John here. I would just like to point out that actually 7 neighbours were circulated for this variance. So, and we heard back from 2 of those 7 property owners. I'd also like to point out that in the official community plan, the wording is a size restricted secondary dwelling. It doesn't specify that it's only for seasonal or temporary use during the year.
Which document was that?
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman?
Which document was that said that?
That was the official community plan relates to the size restricted secondary dwelling. So it doesn't specify the residency, whether it's for guests or temporary. It just restricts the size of the building.
But then stepping down to the zoning bylaw, it does call it a guest cottage.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay. All right, so since this is just a deferral, could we go ahead and take a vote on deferring it until the next meeting? So is there anyone opposed to deferring it?
For clarity, I thought the deferral motion was to consult the neighborhood.
Correct.
Oh,
Could we have the deferral motion read back, please?
Mr. Chairman, I have on record moved by Director Lee, seconded by Director Anderson, that the matter be deferred pending a wider response from the neighborhood. Whether that will take 1 month or more or less is not in the motion itself, but the intent is to, I believe, seek a wider response and report back to the committee on what that looks like.
Okay, so that's how it reads, Nova, and I'm going to ask once again, are there any opposed?
I am opposed.
That was Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 1 opposed. It is carried.
If I might just say for clarity, I think given the zoning bylaw specifying guest cottage, that this would be going against the zoning bylaw. And I don't think that it would be wise for us to support it, given that.
Okay. Well, we've now deferred it, so I guess we'll have to wait until that comes back, and then we can talk about whether it should be passed or not, and whether or not we include things like landscaping, etc.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 2, Cortez Island Fire Protection Service amendment.
May proceed.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Anything from the CAO?
Mr. Chair, I think Sean will speak to this.
To the Electoral Area Services Committee, in front of you is a request from the Cortez Island Firefighting Association, who would like to register as a road rescue provider with Emergency Management British Columbia. However, in order for EMBC to consider their application, there has to be a stipulation in our contract with the CIFA that stipulates that we allow them to go outside of the current fire service boundary to provide this service if tasked to do so by EMBC. A similar provision in our contract already exists for provision of wildfire suppression if tasked to do so by the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resources.
Thank you. This is on receipt.
Sorry, I'm just bringing the actual report up, but I think this is the Blue Jay Lake one, and what Mr. Koopman is speaking to is further down on the agenda. Am I mistaken?
You are mistaken, Director Anderson.
This is property removal request, no?
No.
This is number 2 on the agenda.
Service amendment.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. So if nobody else has a comment, I'd just like to ask a question of Sean. Is this is strictly for out of jurisdiction road and medical initiatives, basically being auto accidents, et cetera, but it's not structure fires? Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
So how does this differ from the situation that we have on Quadra Island, where we have the North Quadra Island Fire Assistance, whatever long name proposal, which is basically just an insurance policy that costs the department $1 a year, allow them to go out and take care of this type of thing. Auto accident that needs extrication or that requires a fire put out or whatever.
Perhaps I should jump in, Mr. Chairman. I think I understand the question. In the case of the Quadra Island situation, the fire department is not a regional district umbrella where it's on Cortez is. And so this naturally comes to the regional district, given that it is a regional service that we're talking about.
Because one's a local service area and one's part of the regional district, it's different.
In Quadra Island's case, it's an improvement district. It's really totally separate from the regional district.
Right.
So those arrangements have been made through contract with the improvement district to provide out of jurisdiction response. Whereas in the Cortez case, it is a regional district service under the control and jurisdiction of the regional district to make that decision on its own, whether it wishes to go this route or not.
Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. In our fire department at Oyster River, we call road and medical rescue initiatives, we call that first responder. Is this not for just first responder, and why aren't we calling it that?
To Director Lee, through the chair, the language in the staff report is based on road rescue provisions set by Emergency Management BC.
So it's not called first responder?
Not in this situation.
And Mr. Chairman, just to add to that, Cortez Island does have a first responder service, a separate service that was approved by the electors through voting, and it's in the implementation process, but that is different than the services being discussed here today.
So what is road and medical rescue initiatives? What is that? If it's not first responder, what is it?
To Director Lee, through the chair, that would be the jaws of life and extricating somebody from a motor vehicle.
No, we still
for
call
clarity,
that
first responder is much broad. Is it much more broad? Is it not? The first responders can enter community spaces or private residence. It's not just restricted to road. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Director Anderson, that is correct.
Okay, this application has my full support as presented.
Call the question on receipt.
Okay, on receipt. All those in favor, or sorry, anybody opposed? It carries. On
Move the
item,
recommendation B.
Second B.
okay, item B has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Item B passes. Item 3, South Cortez Fire Protection Property Removal Request.
Move receipt. Second.
Okay, any discussion on receipt?
I think.
Go ahead. Tom can speak to it or not.
Well, just briefly, Mr. Chairman, this is just an update to the committee of correspondence we have received from the property owner, indicating that he's, well, I guess, less concerned about where we're moving on this than about perhaps having a second look at whether he should even have fire protection for his property. We have advised him that the process of correcting the tax rolls is something that is ongoing and will be completed regardless of any change in the final result of whether he has fire protection or not, and all of those issues associated with that. So it's really just an update to the committee on his correspondence to the regional district.
Question, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I'm happy to receive this just as an update and have no further action, as long as the committee can be assured that once we have communication from BC Assessment on this file, it will come back to us for final consideration.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
So, yeah, this is update, further action to follow. Okay, so item 3, moved and seconded for receipt. Any opposed? Carried. Item 4, Northern Electoral Area D water system.
Receipt.
Okay, seconder.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I did send in some pre-prepared written motions to Edith and yourself last night, and I'm sorry it was so late, but I couldn't get my new computer downstairs to cooperate and send it, so I had to retype all the motions onto my iPad and send them. That's why I got them in so late. But motion 1 that I'd like to put with reference to the Area D water, Edith has the wording, and I'd like to put it up there.
Mr. Chairman, just a reminder, you do have a motion on the floor currently for receipt.
Okay, once a receipt is dealt with, I have a couple of motions.
Okay, so on receipt, Northern Electoral Area D, any opposed? Carried. We're on to item
Motion
B.
motion one that I sent to Edith, and motion 2. Motion 1, with reference to the alleged leaks on private property in Northern Area D water system, that property owners who do not notify the SRD of a leak on their property as soon as possible after it is discovered may have a permanent meter installed on their property at their expense, in addition to the cost of fixing the leak.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, the kind of report speaks to creating a bylaw within Area D to address this. So, this
and that well, you could add and that this recommendation be included in any policy changes.
Well, I think, Mr. Chair, respectfully, this is going to handcuff our ability to appropriately write the bylaw. We don't have it in front of you. This looks like the work of a director doing staff work, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to inhibit our ability to write that bylaw.
Okay, so
well, how do I get that element into the proposed bylaw if I don't put it forward to the committee?
Well, the report speaks to bringing a bylaw forward that addresses this. This is the whole impetus of developing this. We have folks out there that are getting leaks. They don't know about them, which is routine. It's nothing specific to or unique to Area D. We send them their water bill. It's massive. You know, they didn't know they had a leak. We have to find a way to adjust that, make amends to it, and move forward so it doesn't happen again. And we basically provided the committee with a report saying, hey, look, we're intending on bringing a bylaw forward, amendments to a bylaw that address these issues. All
right, then I would just move that these 2 motions be forwarded to staff to consider in the creation of a bylaw for Area D, Northern Area D water. These are just suggestions. Like
Yeah, no,
I am
I
not,
totally agree
I
with
am
you.
reading this stuff and I'm trying to respond to it responsibly and use good judgment. And I'm not doing anything subversive here. This is just
No, I
trying
agree.
to help.
I totally understand. I agree. We're on that. We're actually on the same page here. So I just don't want the motions to limit our ability.
Okay, so if I put the following two motions be forwarded to staff to be included in the bylaw and then give you the motions.
I would say considered in the bylaw, please.
Okay, to be considered in the bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I want to have my input.
Yeah, it's all good. We're on the same page. Yeah, we have to find a way to address leaks, move forward, and ensure they don't happen again, and not have people pay a $10,000 water bill.
Now, the second one isn't included in any discussion, and that is the idea that if a leak occurs outside of a person's property, say on the frontage or under the road or something, that any property owner who discovers the leak and reports it and it's fixed may be credited with $100 reduction on their annual water bill. I think that's an incentive that might help.
That's certainly unique. I've never heard of that, but it's not the worst idea ever, I suppose.
Well, I think it's better to use a carrot than a stick.
Okay, so
I mean, leaks on our side, just for your information, the community, let's say as a whole, would pay for those. So as you know, we buy bulk water off of the city, and so all the water that passes through those meters we pay for. So if it's getting leaked on our side, the whole community will be paying for those. And if it's leaked on the homeowner's side, then it's the homeowner's responsibility. Of course, we're looking to address that, so there's not a lot of pain there. But I agree, it's a little bit of incentive for the people that identify leaks throughout the system and report them, and there's some measure of success. Yeah, I suppose a reward could be appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, I could, as the chair, I'd like to say that the motion, as I read it, I can't see it now. Edie, if you can drop down a bit. The following two motions be forwarded to staff to be considered in the bylaw. So it's covered, Brenda. Both of them are covered.
Good.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so I would suggest that these be added on to B as presented, because right now the committee, of course, has not decided that they want to even have a look at the bylaw. So these two motions speak to the assumption that that will happen. I think given the wording that number or B, if these two were appended to B as written, then I think that would make perfect sense.
Okay, so then the motion would then read, encourage reporting of leaks in RAD water system, and that the following two motions be forwarded to staff, and then include them all in the motion.
Yes, that is my suggestion.
Okay, so if they would like to move that.
Have we voted on receipt?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to move that.
Okay, I'll second that.
That includes the portion that is on the board that Edie has put up there, that the following two motions be forwarded to staff to be considered in the bylaw, and then verbatim as they stand right now. That's the motion. Is there a second? There was a seconder, Gerald?
Yeah, I seconded it, yeah.
Okay, any discussion? Anybody opposed? That's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, schedule of meetings. Leave the schedule of meetings.
Move receipt.
Move receipt of report, first of all. Seconded. Anyone opposed to that? Okay, so
Is this the same schedule that we saw in the fall at board? There's been no amendments, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Thank you.
I didn't hear the answer there. What was the answer? Yes?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, this is basically standard practice. Don't believe anything's changed. There is the option for the committee or the chair to have some say in a possible amendment at some time during the year if necessary. So I think that's great. So did we vote on receipt, Tom, or not?
Yes, it's been voted on.
Okay, and then on to B.
Move B.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just before we approve this, I have raised the matter in the past of having 3 straight months of only one meeting per month. June, July, and August were really thin on the ground. Actually, we already did have 1 meeting per month, but now we're not going to have any meetings June, July, August. And that's
No,
in the
that's
height.
not accurate. No, Director Lee,
Okay.
that's not accurate. We're once a month. We've always met once a month, and we're still meeting once a month. If you can see on there, it's June 16th.
So I just want to know. I just want to know that the months that we're slower in the summer, that's in the height of development season, and is our availability to vote on things like variance applications and whatnot going to be impacted by this schedule?
Again, the East schedule is not impacted at all. As you can see, we're meeting once a month as we always have and do.
Okay, good. Sorry.
Okay, so June or July and August, we're not meeting, correct?
Yeah, we're on there. Yeah, June 16th and July 14th.
Sorry, we're meeting July 14th?
Yep. August 11th.
We're meeting each one of those months.
It's again, it's in the attached report. The schedule's there, the date.
I don't have it open. Just one sec. Let me open it up. It was my understanding that July and August we don't have board meetings. Is that correct?
We have 1 board meeting in July and August. We reduced the summer schedule, July, August, September, and December, to 1 board meeting a month instead of 2.
Okay. And so you're tacking on.
There's no change. There's no change to East, basically. The schedule that the board has adopted for the board reduces meetings in July, August, September, and December. So we typically meet twice a month on the board. In those 4 months, we meet once a month.
Okay.
And East, we will and always have met once a month.
Okay. So then the schedule of meetings is basically the same. Status quo.
Yeah.
Anybody opposed? Okay, it's carried. Proposed grants and aid financial assistance policy for
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we defer this item until we receive a legal opinion concerning using the Electoral Area Administration Service for the Electoral Area grants and aid.
Second.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just jump in there, I apologize. That was the intent, and we anticipated getting that opinion to have these 2 items consecutively on that. We didn't get that opinion, and I mistakenly put this on the agenda. So I think deferral is appropriate. Apologize for that.
Not a problem.
And that was my understanding, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Dave. So go ahead. Gerald, we have a mover, a seconder. One opposed to deferring. Okay, that has carried. Request for financial assistance, Area D, item 7, report from CAO.
Move receipt.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded on the report from the
nothing from staff, Mr. Chair.
Nothing from staff. Okay, then all those in favor of receipt, opposed, or sorry, anybody opposed? Item B.
Move B.
Second.
Moved and seconded for grants and aid B1 and 2. Discussion? Anyone opposed? That is carried. And look at that. Now we get to go to a closed session. So do we have an email on that, Edie?
Move that the report from the CAO be received on the closed session.
And my apologies, meeting request is coming now.
Second.
Okay. All right, you're gonna have to hang on, folks.
And
Until
Mr.
we-
Chair, I might need to bow out before the closed session.
Don't
Do my
even have
best.
the session in front of me. As soon as I see it, then we can open that meeting. And then if you need to, you can recuse yourself.
Well, it's not about recusing. I just time-wise, I might need to, and I've got something else that I'm juggling here. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's fine. So let us know when you're ready to leave if you are.
Did you call the question, Mr. Chair, on receipt of closed session?
Pardon me?
On the report, on the receipt of the CAO's report to go into closed.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded to receive the report, and that is currently where we're at in the committee.
Okay, and what I am saying as the chair is that I do not have a closed session invite. Teams meeting.
Edie is sending those right now, so we can leave this meeting, and as soon as you get the invite, which should come momentarily, we'll just join that.
Correction, there's a motion on the floor to receive a report that suggests a closed meeting. And once the committee receives that report, then you can vote on whether or not to hold a closed meeting. And if you decide to hold a closed meeting, then
Okay, I got you, Tom. I got you now. That was on the last agenda. Okay.
Correct.
So on that motion to go into closed session, anybody opposed? Okay, we will go into closed
And
session.
move that a closed session be held under the auspices of subsections 91 EF and O of the community charter.
Second.
Okay, not anybody opposed? If we could just take,
And
Now we can go.
And finally, Mr. Chair, there's a motion to terminate this meeting, and then you can open up a brand new meeting in closed session.
Move to terminate.
okay, motion to terminate. All those in favor? Opposed? Carry.
So now we leave.